Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today, I'm going to go my review of Wrestlemania 6. Starting off the evening, we're going to our first match of the night. It is Rick Martel versus Koko B. Ware. I thought this was a relatively good matchup to open up Wrestlemania 6. Back and forth matchup between both Martel and Koko B. Ware, with Martel keeping the pace of the match. Koko then gets up, hits a crossbody off the top rope on Martel. Koko then lands multiple drop kicks on Rick Martel in the middle of the ring. Koko then lands a flying headbutt on Martel, but Martel ultimately applies his signature Boston Crab on Koko B. Ware, and your winner of the match by submission is Rick Martel. Hats off to Rick Martel for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WWE Tag Team Championships. It is Demolition versus the Colossal Connection. I thought this was a relatively good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between both Demolition and the Colossal Connection. Haku then goes to hit a thrust kick. Missed, ends up hitting Andre the Giant. Demolition then capitalized on that, hit the finish, pin for the 3, and your winners of the match, and at that time, new WWE Tag Team Champions are Demolition. Hats off to Demolition for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Earthquake versus Hercules. I thought this was an okay matchup. Glorified squash match, if you ask me. Earthquake was keeping the pace throughout the entire match. He ends up hitting a devastating elbow drop on Hercules, and then he ultimately hits the finish as well on Hercules, pinning him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Earthquake. Hats off to Earthquake for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Mr. Perfect versus Brutus the Barber. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Mr. Perfect and Brutus Barber. Brutus was keeping the pace of the match. Brutus then sends Mr. Perfect into the ring post. Brutus then goes for the cover, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Brutus the Barber. Hats off to Brutus the Barber for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Roddy Piper versus Bad News Brown. I thought this was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Piper and Bad News Brown, with Piper keeping the pace of the match. But this match ultimately ends in a double countout. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Hart Foundation versus the Bolsheviks. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Hart Foundation keeping the pace of the match. And the Hart Foundation end up hitting the finish on the Bolsheviks, pinning them for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Hart Foundation. Hats off to the Hart Foundation for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Tito Santana versus the Barbarian. I thought this was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Tito Santana and the Barbarian, with Barbarian keeping the pace of the match. Tito then hits a flying forearm on the Barbarian, but the Barbarian goes to the top rope, hits a clothesline on Tito Santana, pinning him for the 3, and your winner of the match is the Barbarian. Hats off to the Barbarian for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire versus Randy Savage and Sensational Sherry. A couple of things I want to say about this matchup. Number one, this was the first ever supposedly mixed tag team matchup, which is absolutely insane. And awesome at the same time. During the match, though, Dusty brings out a secret weapon. He brings in Miss Elizabeth to this match. Randy Savage obviously gets mad about this, as well as Sensational Sherry. The match itself was a relatively good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Dusty and Randy, with Dusty keeping the pace of the match. Randy then hits an axe handle off the top rope on Dusty. Randy then hits Dusty with the scepter, with the referee being distracted. Dusty then gets up, lands multiple elbows on Randy. Sapphire then goes to hit a roll-up on Sensational Sherry with the help of Miss Elizabeth. Pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire. Hats off to Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is the Orient Express versus the Rockers. The match itself was a decent match. Back and forth matchup between both the Orient Express and the Rockers, with the Rockers keeping the pace of the match. Sato ends up throwing salt into Marty Jannetty's face. which causes Marty Jannetty to be counted out in this match. And your winners of the match due to count out are the Orient Express. Hats off to the Orient Express for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Jim Duggan versus Dino Bravo. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Jim Duggan and Dino Bravo, with Duggan keeping the pace of the match. Earthquake is here. He calls it a distraction. Jimmy Hart then throws a 2x4 into the ring. Duggan then hits Dino with the 2x4. Referee not seeing it. Earthquake pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jim Duggan. After the match, though, Earthquake then attacks Jim Duggan, and an all-out fight breaks out. But all in all, hats off to Jim Duggan for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the $1 Million Championship. It is Ted DiBiase versus Jake the Snake Roberts. I thought this was a relatively good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between both Roberts and DiBiase, with Jake keeping the pace. Jake Roberts and Ted DiBiase both exchange in the middle of the ring. Ted DiBiase hits a devastating pile driver on Jake Roberts. Jake then hits his signature clothesline on Ted DiBiase. And your winner of the match due to count out is Ted DiBiase. A couple of things I'm going to say about this match real quickly, man. Number one, Jake Roberts. Big fan of Jake the Snake Roberts, man. Absolute legend. And, honestly, for what it's worth, Jake Roberts and Ted DiBiase tore the house down, I think, in this matchup. It was an absolutely fantastic match. And it's always great to see the $1 Million Championship. I feel like the $1 Million Championship didn't get a whole lot of notoriety during its, run, if you will, in WWE. I thought it was a great championship. Ted DiBiase, one of the greatest heels in professional wrestling of all time. And this made for a great matchup. But hats off to Ted DiBiase for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Akeem versus Big Boss Man. I thought this was an okay match at best. DiBiase does come out to the ring, attacks Big Boss Man before the match even gets started, before the bell sounds. There's a back and forth matchup. Akeem was keeping the pace of the match, but Boss Man ultimately hits a Boss Man slam on Akeem, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Big Boss Man. A couple things I want to say about this. Number one, it was an okay matchup, and a lot of people were like, oh, well, it's not that bad of a match. To be honest with you, I never was a big fan of the Big Boss Man, just personally. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really a big fan of Akeem. I thought Akeem was better as the one-man gang, in my honest opinion. But I understand why, he became Akeem working with Slick. And Slick was a really good manager. But I didn't really like the whole Akeem gimmick. And Big Boss Man, for what it's worth, he's had some good matches in his career. But I just, growing up as a fan, I didn't really follow Big Boss Man as much as I would like a Randy Savage or a Rick Rude or Mr. Perfect. So... but hats off to the Big Boss Man for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Rick Rude versus Jimmy Superfly Snuka. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Rick and Jimmy Snuka, with Jimmy keeping the pace of the match. But Rick Rude ends up hitting the Rude Awakening on Jimmy Snuka, pinning him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Rick Rude. Hats off to Rick Rude for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WrestleMania 6. Title versus title. We have Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan. What more can I say about this matchup, man? This was a great matchup. Fantastic main event for WrestleMania 6. Pretty much a back and forth matchup between both Hogan and Warrior throughout this entire match. But Ultimate Warrior ultimately hits the finish on Hulk Hogan, pinning him for the 3, and your winner of the match is the Ultimate Warrior. A couple of things I'm going to say about this match as well as WrestleMania 6 before I get out of here. Number one, I honestly truly believe as a fan that the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan match, the title versus title match, was probably one of the best WrestleMania matches, one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. First time ever, title versus title, and at this time, Ultimate Warrior was just as big, if not bigger than Hulk Hogan was. And vice versa. Ultimate Warrior, a lot of fans loved Ultimate Warrior. And he came in as a babyface. And Hulk Hogan was obviously a humongous babyface in professional wrestling. And Warrior was right there neck and neck with Hogan as far as the fans and people gravitating towards Ultimate Warrior. And this just made for a great storyline, man, and a fantastic main event for WrestleMania 6. And it definitely delivered. It was a fantastic match. And to be honest with you, I feel like Ultimate Warrior doesn't get a whole lot of credit where the credit's deserved, man. He's put on some phenomenal matchups. And honestly, he could have been a multi-time world champion, in my honest opinion. Might be a hot take for some people, but Ultimate Warrior could have been a multi-time world champion in WWE, hands down. He had the gimmick, he had the persona, he had the wrestling ability. You know, he cuts a great promo. I mean, what more can you ask for? And he has the physique, man. He has the stature of a prototypical professional wrestler. He has the look of a Hulk Hogan or a Randy Savage. You know, he could have been a multi-time world heavyweight champion, hands down. But to me, honestly, the match of the night is the main event for me for WrestleMania 6. I mean, you can't get no better than Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan title versus title. That was the match of the night for me. As far as giving WrestleMania 6 a rating from 1 out of 10, I was kind of back and forth on this, man, to be honest with you. But I'm going to give WrestleMania 6 a solid 7.5. I think it was really, really good. And I know I've been dropping a lot of 7.5s here lately, but this one was really tough, man. There was a lot of good matches on here, but there were some matches I could have done without, like Akeem versus Boss Man, Rick Rude versus Jimmy Snuka. I don't know why that was booked. Mainly was because of the main event. Title versus title, Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan, and as well as the supposedly first ever mixed tag team matchup between Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire versus Randy Savage and Sensational Sherry as well. That's another reason why I'm giving WrestleMania 6 a 7.5, close to 8, man, at best. Definitely wasn't the worst WrestleMania. Obviously was not the best WrestleMania, in my opinion, but all in all, it was a really good WrestleMania for WrestleMania 6. So, and again, like I said, the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan match was absolutely phenomenal. One of the best WrestleMania matches of all time, in my honest opinion. But this is my review of WrestleMania 6. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.